Swamp Dogman. Sleeping? Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a Dogman or possibly Luguru or Ruguru story for you from back in the 1970s. My younger brother and I both saw what we thought was a werewolf, and it was either sleeping or else it might have already passed on before we came upon it. I can show you the exact spot we saw the Dogman using Google Street View. Here are the details as I remember them all these years later. I know this happened in 1976 because that was the first summer after my parents got divorced. My younger brother Jeff and I got to choose which parent we would spend our vacation with, and we both chose our dad. Mom was going to be in New York or Boston or somewhere, but Dad was camping with his friendly new girlfriend in the Atchafalaya National Wildlife Refuge, which is really just a big old smelly swamp. I was 16 and Jeff was 14, so you know we made the wise choice. Dad was a science teacher in a high school, but he liked to pretend he was a real scientist when we were out in nature. No matter what we came across, he'd lecture us about it. Sometimes he'd launch into the same lecture we'd already heard 3 times. But I liked my dad and his lecturing. He usually gave off this vibe, like everything was under control, and he was an expert on all subjects. Mom, on the other hand, was stressed out and cranky about all subjects. I knew Dad wasn't really as smart as he would like to act, but I enjoyed his act anyhow, and I still miss him. So Dad was doing something scientific, no doubt, with his girlfriend one hot day, while Jeff and I were skipping rocks from the wooden pier across the thick green skin on top of the water. If any body of water ever deserved its own lake monster, it was that one right there. But the water on that swamp was so still most of the time, like no animal had passed that way since the age of the dinosaur. My brother Jeff noticed the bad smell first, or at least he was the first to talk about it. Don't get me wrong, Jeff wasn't complaining. He was still just barely young enough to still really like bad smells. I had just recently grown out of that age, so I was suffering once the aroma hit my poor nostrils. It's hard to know what to even compare it to. It was like smoke that makes you cough, and liquid that goes down the wrong pipe. It smelled like a stubbed toe. It was painful, and it was just wrong. So when Jeff suggested we go find what the source of that odor was, of course I jumped eagerly to join him in the search. The pier is along this nature trail, right? And so we followed it further in, and the smell got even worse. It felt like I was chopping onions and then rubbing them in my eyes. It was terrible. I needed windshield wipers for my eyeballs. They were tearing up so much. And then we saw it, lying on the grass right next to the water. At first I thought it was camouflaged somehow to blend in with the green grass and the greener water, but upon closer inspection, it was a large furry animal with green-tinted fur. It was wet, with the water seeping into the dirt all around as it lay there perfectly still, back to the ground, closed eyes facing upward. I'd call it a dog, except that dogs don't lie on their backs with their faces looking upward. Humans do that, but this wasn't a human. It had a head like a dog, or really I guess more like a wolf, and yet I saw it lying perfectly still, like a dead guy at his own funeral. It had these ears that reminded me of hairier versions of Batman's ears, up on top of his mask, you know. But in the context of this wolf-like head, I would have to say they were dog or wolf-like ears. Very tall and pointed, though, like Batman in the Tim Burton movies. It had a big, broad, mostly hairless greenish-gray chest that I watched closely to see if it was breathing. It had huge, steroided out pectoral muscles. I remember it having muscles on its muscles, and green fungus on top of that. Its arms looked like they went straight down to its knees or beyond. And the most incredible part was that these tree trunk arms ended in claws that looked more like giant hands than giant paws. I think I could have placed both my hands in his one, and mine would have looked like baby hands in comparison. The mouth was held just slightly open, and long rows of scary-looking fangs showed through. Again, I studied the mouth and the nose from the closest safe position, squinting and attempting to determine whether or not this creature was still breathing. I couldn't figure out what was going on with its legs. I guess they were like dog legs, in that they were covered in fur, and they ended in sharp claws. But the way they were bent as they lay there, I wasn't sure how they would work when it was alive and in action. Was I looking at a humanoid that ran around on all fours like a dog? Or was I looking at a dog lying there who normally stood and walked around upright like a human being? That made it all harder to understand what we were seeing. Jeff wanted to reach out and touch the big dog thing, but I stopped him. I wasn't afraid that he'd catch a disease or anything. I just wasn't sure the dog-headed manster was really dead. If he was just sleeping, I certainly didn't want to wake him up. His fur seemed dark gray underneath that swamp green tint, thick in spots, almost non-existent in others. It looked like our wolfman had some recent bruises sustained in the area of his ribs, but all of the skin that was visible had a dull, dead, bluish-greenish-gray sort of a hue to it. And then, of course, the murky green of the swamp was tinting everything else. I could swear I saw some kind of marker on his shoulder, and I leaned in closer to get a better look. It looked to me as though it were either a tattoo or maybe a brand placed there by a hot branding iron. But in any case, it was a hand-drawn symbol. There was a circle in the center and had little half-circles all around it. Maybe they were meant to be quarter moon designs. I don't know what the symbol meant, but it creeped me out, and I decided it was time for me and my brother to go fetch our science teacher, Dad, to come figure this mystery out for us. We ran back to find our father, and then once we did, it seemed to take forever to convince him that we weren't kidding around or playing some kind of game. We really did need him to come see what we found, and we needed him to come with us right away. He seemed to finally understand what we were trying to say, and then the three of us rushed off to where we had left the Dogman, or the Dogman body, or whatever it was that we left. Well, when we got back, there was nothing there, except a wet spot on the ground that still retained just a little of the Dogman's body odor, and some matted down grass leading to the swamp. Pointing out the latter, Dad suggested that maybe a gator grabbed our werewolf and dragged him into the water for a snack. It did look as though something heavy had been lying there, or dragged around in the area. My brother and I looked around frantically and for some time, but we were unable to locate the prone form anywhere else. We were disappointed, but grateful that our father didn't call us liars. Once he got to the spot, he seemed to take our claims seriously. That night, we all had a long discussion about the Dogman, wondering aloud whether it woke up and swam away, or if it had passed on and gotten eaten. My father had this science teacher sort of attitude that there's always enough evidence to prove what happened in every single situation, but there aren't always people smart enough to realize that. In other words, if we were all-knowing, we could always prove or disprove anything we needed to. Sometimes I found his worldview comforting, but when it came to the Dogman, I found it frustrating to think that all the answers to all the questions about Dogman might really be there for us to see, if only we were smart enough to know how to see them. Like all those years that criminals got away with crimes because cops didn't even realize that fingerprints were there. DNA was there. So many other things we don't even know about yet are there, and were always there. But it doesn't even matter if you don't know how to see it. On our last night in the swamp, which was over a week later, we smelled that terrible odor again. My brother and I were like, oh no, not another one. This time, it had already started to get dark, and I just wanted that creature to go away and leave us alone. My father went with us into the woods a little ways, trying to get a glimpse of what was producing that horrible smell, before we all saw something big running past us. It was just a little further into the darkness, and it smelled like all the swamp vomited as it ran by. My dad claimed he saw the canine head of the thing, and I believe him. Jeff and I only saw a really big muscular guy with patchy fur and the same kind of mix of colors as the tattooed or branded one that we saw lying down next to the nature trail. I'm not 100% sure it was the Dogman, but I don't know what else it could have been. My science teacher father suddenly decided class was over, and we retreated quickly. Either that was the same green-tinted swamp Dogman that my brother and I had seen sleeping that afternoon, or else it was another of the same species. In either case, it smelled the same as the first one, demonstrating that we were not smelling the aroma of a deceased Dogman. The way the creature's body was green seemed to indicate that it spent plenty of time in that green swamp water. That probably also contributed strongly to his extremely funky aroma. I prefer to believe that it was the same animal or man both times, and that we only witnessed him sleeping. I can't prove I'm right, but it's the version I would rather were true. Concerning that tattoo or brand on the ruguru's shoulder, my brother used to say that proved he was a werewolf or a ruguru. I wonder, though, if it might have been an animal, and its owner or farmer branded it with his mark. I'm not sure that the symbol on his shoulder proves anything, other than that this creature had some sort of contact with human culture before we came upon it. There are a whole lot of different stories about what dog-headed men and upright canines are, and how they came to be. Werewolves may be humans cursed to change into a ravenous wolf, or a human who transforms into some kind of wolf-human hybrid monster. In some versions of the legend, it's a curse, and in other versions, it's a sort of a disease communicable through contact of bodily fluid. For instance, if you're bitten by a werewolf and survive, then you become a werewolf yourself. Some people use the terms ruguru and ruguru to describe werewolves. Others use those terms to describe shamans or wizards who consciously and deliberately transform themselves into dog-headed, upright walking monsters known to haunt the swamps in and around Louisiana. Then, of course, you've got your Dogman, who is much more WYSIWYG than the others. Dogmen, or wolfmen, are just what they appear to be: dog-headed men or upright walking canines. They don't shapeshift. They don't transform from one kind of creature to another. In my opinion, this is the least likely to be what we saw. I say that because of the brand or tattoo. I feel like that moon symbol was placed there by a human on that shoulder. I just don't know if it was done at the request of the dog-headed man, or in spite of his wishes. Possibly that tattoo is what cursed him to become what he was. On the other hand, maybe the tat is the source of the magic which allowed him to shapeshift if indeed he could do that. If it was a Dogman, then the only way that symbol got there was by someone corralling the creature and then branding him. I just can't see that even being possible. A Dogman is not a cow or a bull. If you try to brand an upright walking canine, you'd be lucky not to end up with that red-hot poker way up your own wazoo. So, my late brother and I agreed that we probably saw a shape-shifting werewolf or ruguru, and it was probably performing some kind of out-of-body shamanism when we came upon it, which is why the body seemed so lifeless. But I'm curious what you think. What was it exactly? And was it alive? Or did I see a deceased Dogman? Dogman premonition dream that came true. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I always liked my Aunt Elizabeth down in the Louisiana bayous, but mostly because she let me stay up as late as I wanted to and eat all the candy I could get my hands on. When she would try to teach me about her weird magical beliefs, I didn't really want to hear about it. But when she moved to an old witch house, I started to have bad dreams about the Dogman. Dreams which started to come true. I went down to stay with Aunt Elizabeth at her new house the summer she moved in. I was a teenager looking to get away from my parents, but also I didn't want my aunt to get lonely. Although I never believed in psychic powers or hocus pocus, I felt a bad energy as soon as I set foot on that new property. I felt uneasy there, and I had bad nightmares from my very first night trying to sleep in that old haunted place. I dreamed I was by the water down in the swamps, and that it was night. It was a cool night, and I was listening to the frogs and insects and the other sounds of the swamp. Then I noticed, under the brackish water just offshore, that two yellow eyes were staring at me from down there. I tried to focus in on those eyes, but it was hard to do because this was a dream, not real. The eyes seemed to be lit up, and I wondered how bright they would have to be for me to see them through that muddy water. I couldn't see a body or even a face attached to those glowing underwater eyes, so I imagined it must be an alligator or a crocodile just under the surface, studying me as I stared back at it. I was growing increasingly uncomfortable, but I would not say the dream was full-on scary. At least, not until the alligator burst out of the water, and I could see it was not an alligator at all. The yellow, glowing eyes were set in a long, toothy snout, but it was not a reptile one. It was hairy. It was canine. It was some kind of a werewolf with very long arms. I had thought I was far enough away from the shore to be safe, but I had not been. The wolf man grabbed at me, and I tried to escape. I woke up screaming, and for the first few seconds, I lay there in bed. I thought I was still there in the swamp, with the long, long arms of the ruguru reaching out and grabbing me, holding me, and not letting me get away. And when I saw that I was only tangled in my blankets, I felt stupid, and I felt glad that I hadn't awakened my aunt. I didn't tell Aunt Elizabeth about that dream, or the next couple of them that I had either. But when I awoke screaming from a sleepwalking experience outside of her bedroom door, I wasn't able to keep it a secret any longer. Here's how that happened. I thought I was getting up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. I mean, I was doing that, but apparently, unbeknownst to me, I was not fully awake as I was doing this. When I exited the bathroom, I turned and saw, outside the second-story window in the pitch-black night, the same dog-headed monstrosity that had leaped out of the swamp to grab me in my first nightmare. It was standing in a place where there was no roof or ledge to stand on. I screamed in horror. I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know it was a dream. I woke up my Aunt Elizabeth by accident, who came out of her room into the hallway to find me pointing at the window and shrieking about a dog-headed man who was reaching through the wall to get at me. She kept telling me that there wasn't anything there. Eventually, I saw that she was right, and that somehow I had been dreaming while walking around. I am not aware of having ever sleepwalked before. I think it happened because I was in that witch house. That house stressed me out, and I had to leave, as much as I loved my Aunt Elizabeth. When we talked about why I was having to go, Aunt Elizabeth admitted to me that I was not the first person in her life to tell her about a dog-headed man in their nightmares. In fact, just before he passed on, her late husband became terrified, convinced that there was a wolf or a man with a wolf head stalking Aunt Elizabeth. She just assumed it was either his illness or the medication they were giving him at the time, and she tried to bury those memories, but I was making it hard for her to do that. So, about a week or two after I went back home, I got a call from my Aunt Elizabeth. She sounded pretty shaken up, and she told me she was selling the old witch house. I asked her why, and she told me she had seen him too. Seen who too? She'd seen the Dogman. In a dream, I asked. No, on the road into town, she answered. He jumped out in front of her car. She had to swerve quickly to avoid hitting him. This resulted in her smashing up the front end of the car and totaling someone else's mailbox. But the worst part was that because of her age, and because of the excuse she gave why the accident happened, they temporarily removed her driver's license until she can pass some health and psych tests. Now I'm the crazy one seeing the Dogman, she told me. I promised her I'd help her move as soon as she found a new place to live. Aunt Elizabeth passed away peacefully at the motel she was staying at while she tried to sell the old witch place. Ever since then, it's belonged to me and my family, and we've never been able to sell it either. Even to this day, I'm still too scared to even visit the old house. And it's all because that was the location where I had the Dogman premonition dream that came true. Experiencing the post-holiday blahs? Need something to get your blood pumping again? Then check out the Dog Days of January. A new Dogman story each day for the rest of the month here on Scary Stories NYC. Our executive producer is Fred Gilbert. He's a man of iron Wilbert. He is great, that's what I said. Last name Gilbert, first name Fred. Please join me in welcoming Fred Gilbert, our newest PayPal subscriber at peterbernard.com. In exchange for his kind generosity, Mr. Gilbert gets to see our secret, uncensored, scary Dogman stories, far too wild to ever tell on this channel. He also gains access to our 21 hours of archived, secret, uncensored Dogman stories, with a new volume coming soon. In addition, once a week, Mr. Gilbert gets to see one of our episodes in advance of the public. You can get all these perks too by either joining our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com or else by clicking that join button under this or any of our videos to become a Scary Stories channel member. And now, to fill in any details I may have left out, here's international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman. Take it away, Hank. Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.